So today, I'm going to talk to you about trust. Because trust is the key to success in your jobs, whether you believe it or not. And specifically, I want to talk about 3 aspects of trust that we're going to get to in a moment. The first one is going to be the Declaration of Independence. The second one is going to be a police badge. And the third one is going to be Oprah. So before you guys think I'm totally crazy, I promise I will connect this all in a moment. But first, I want to tell you a story and make this really clear about why trust is important. Because we all want credit for the things that we do. But the problem is, we work really hard, and sometimes we get passed over. I don't know about you, but everyone I seem to talk to has had this happen. When I first started my career, I was working on a team of 4 people, and I was determined to shine. I was a brand new employee, and I wanted to do my very best work, so I worked tirelessly. I worked nights, and I worked weekends, and I wanted to make this great impression, and I made this huge contribution. So when we finally shipped, there was this big launch party, and the VP got up on stage, and he said, "I would like to congratulate Josh and his team for their hard work." And I remember sitting there, and I was stunned. How could the VP be so out of touch with what was really going on? Didn't our manager look at the check-ins that we were doing? Right? Like, what happened to credit? How did Josh get singled out when he had done the second least amount of work of anyone, and I had done the most, and then even the senior person on the team who designed the feature wasn't called out? And it was the first time in my career that I realized that success and recognition isn't just about working hard and doing the best work, because I felt like I had done that. So what is it about? Well, fast forward 10 years or more, 10 years of managing software teams, I understand what went wrong, because it's actually really hard to judge anyone's performance. I mean, think about it. You can't judge by the hours someone works. You can't judge by the lines of code they write, because you can spend weeks debugging a problem and only touch 1 line of code, or you can cut and paste thousands. You can't even judge by tasks, because you'd never want to penalize a great employee who got hung up or made a mistake. And even if you did decide to judge on raw output, then that doesn't take into all the factors that make great employees great, like things like helping other people, bringing innovative ideas and solutions, or just being a great person to work with. So if you can't judge on output and you can't judge by what people do, like, how do you judge performance? And the reality is that performance is really subjective. And particularly in all the roles that we all have, whether you're an engineer or you're in operations or in business, every day is different. And some days you might be really, really productive and get a lot done. And other days, maybe less so. And then some days, you might be really smart and you have this great idea and it solves this problem. And then other days, you might just be checking things off your to-do list or not. And that's the ebb and flow of our work. And so, as you think about your performance, there's another critical component, which is that the more autonomy you have and the more freedom you have to make your own decisions, the less your manager knows what you do. They're not looking over your shoulder every day, looking at the goods and the bads, keeping a tally. And the smarter you are and the more you get done, the harder it is to judge your performance, because you have all this freedom. This freedom is coming at a cost, right? This ambiguity. And so how are they judging? How do you get noticed? How are they judging your performance? Well, that's what I'm talking to you about. It comes to trust. So this is the key. And I want you to think about trust as like money. It's your currency at work. And the more your boss trusts you, the more they invest in you, the more freedom you get, the more influence you have, the more responsibility in other projects. And if you think about it, you would never give money to someone that you most likely wouldn't give money to someone that you didn't know well. But if you would give money to someone that if you gave it to them, they not just paid the investment back, but they made you rich in return. And that's what your boss wants. And so I want you to ask yourself, are you a good investment? Because success is contingent upon trust. And trust comes from having like a really great relationship with your boss and the people around you. A relationship that's based on authenticity, being consistent and reliable, and hard work. So, as you think about that, ask yourself, does your boss trust you? Do your peers trust you? And have you done a good job to earn their trust? Because if you want to be successful, which I'm sure you do, then you have to build trust. So that's what this talk is about, or the rest of this talk. You've already been listening to me for a little bit. So this is where your Declaration of Independence, your police badge, and Oprah are coming into play. Because I want each of you to leave with at least one idea or spark that you can kind of take into your work and actually make your life and your career better. So the rest of this talk, I want you to be paying attention. You take notes if you want, but at the end, I expect each of you to have one thing that you're going to do. So let's talk about your Declaration of Independence. So this is the first part of trust, and it's really about your contribution. And I chose the Declaration of Independence because I think it's a great piece of work that stands on its own. And this facet of trust, I think, is the easiest to understand. Just think about your teammates. If you really needed something done, who would you ask? Your answer is going to be the person who always comes through for you with a solid contribution. They are responsible and valuable. So now think about your contribution. Does your work matter? How do you know? If I went to your boss today and asked them who the most valuable person on their team because they're making the biggest impact, would they say it was you? We all want to feel like the work that we do is important and that we're a critical part of the team. But the reality is sometimes we work on things that don't move the needle. We just get stuck in the tactics. And so I think it's really important to think about it and make sure that the things that you're doing are actually high priorities and are creating a return on investment for your company. So the best way to do this, I think, is to schedule a weekly planning session with yourself. I call it my Ninja Planning Session. I do it every Monday without fail. It's an hour, and I revisit like the priorities I set and make sure and kind of lay out what I want to do for the week. The secret of time management, I always say, is knowing what to do with an hour. So when you get to Wednesday or Thursday and you feel like you've gotten a lot done, you can go back and look at the priorities you set on Monday. And sometimes I find that what I set isn't actually what I've done. So that's one way at least to make sure that the work you're doing is important work and not just things that you think are fun or interesting, because a lot of us can do that. Another part of your contribution is you have to do more. So what do I mean? Well, I remember my very first performance review. I remember I told you about how I worked really hard. Well, I went into my boss's office and I was like, I'm going to be exceptional. That was like our top rating. And he's like, well, you're above average. And I'm like, how am I above average? I did everything you asked. I did it ahead of schedule, and it was really high quality. Like, I don't understand, how is that average? He's like, that's what you get paid to do. You got above average because your work was so good. But if you want to be exceptional, you have to do more than what's asked of you. You have to look for opportunities or gaps that you can fill. And the bigger the gap is, or the more important or more strategic that gap is, the bigger it'll impact your performance and help you get that exceptional rating. In retrospect, this was probably the best piece of career advice I ever got because it helped propel me over and over again after that. So the key, if you're not sure where to look, is you got to start with your manager. Your relationship with your boss is actually your most important relationship at work. But not all bosses are good bosses, like Darth Vader. So your first action item is if you're not regularly meeting with your boss and having regular one-on-ones, you should schedule those because you need to be getting consistent feedback and checking in with them. The second thing is if you use your one-on-ones to talk about status, you're wasting important time. You should be using that time to get to know your boss, build rapport, learn more about their background, where they came from, what makes them successful, how they got into their role. You should use that time to solicit feedback on your performance. I remember I've had 2 employees who work for me, and every single one-on-one they would ask me, do you have any feedback for me? How can I be better? And while I don't actually love that question, the fact that they asked me every single time I met with them, it made me a better manager because I got kind of tired of being like, oh, you're doing good. So I'd actually look for stuff. I would look for ways they could write better emails or ways they could lead meetings better or just improve what they were doing in their technical work. So make your boss a better manager by asking them for feedback. Don't wait for them to tell you. The other thing is, I feel really strongly that you should send status every week. I never used to do this till I was a CTO and I was working with an executive coach. And she suggested, why don't you send status to the CEO every week about what you do? And I was like, status, really? Like, of course he knows I'm doing important stuff. That's why I'm an executive. But the thing is that he actually didn't have that much insight into what I'm doing, because remember that thing that I told you, the more autonomy you have, the less anyone knows what you're doing. So by sending people status and keeping them apprised of what's actually going on, it allows them to give more faith in that you're working on the right things. And it helps to not just say, here's what I did last week, but here's what I plan to do, and get feedback earlier, because that will help make sure your work matters. The other key part I think about this is that when you do it consistently and reliably, they constantly see a stream of work pushed to their inbox. So keep it brief and make it really clear and easy to understand. But really, all of this is about making sure that your contribution stands out, that people know what you're doing, and that your work actually stands on its own, right? Your own Declaration of Independence. So you've got to be amazing. All right, let's talk about the next part of trust, your police badge. Anyone think they know what this one means? Don't get too excited, people. Okay, it's your reputation. Because when you see a police badge, it automatically conjures up feelings and emotions in your mind of what you think about the police. Whether it's positive or negative, it's a reputation. And so I want you to think about your reputation at work. And the reason this really matters is that success doesn't come from hard work. I mean, hard work is a part of it. But if you think about it, every raise you've got, every promotion, even a job offer, that doesn't come from work. That comes from a person making that decision, deciding to give that to you. Your relationships are one of your most important assets in your career. And I think as technologists, we overlook it, right? Because we are focused on the hard skills. We're focused on, getting better at this technology or learning this programming language, which is great. But the people really matter. And so I want you to spend a minute, and I want you to think about your coworkers. Specifically, I want you to think about your favorite coworker. Got them in your head? Now I want you to think about what makes them different. Why are they different than everyone else? And if you go to them with a problem, how do they make you feel when you ask them for a question? Now I want you to think about those feelings, and I want you to think about, are you that person to other people? You guys can think for a minute. I'm going to drink some water. Okay. Done thinking? You've got to be the model teammate. So you've got to think about, are there things you could be doing differently to be someone that people really like working with? You want to be the person that makes everyone else smarter and get more done because you're there. You're part of that team. You want to be fun, and you want to be pleasant. As fun as some of us can be. So think about how you're showing up to work each day. Are you bringing positivity, or are you stressed out and really busy? And I think another important part of being a technologist is that we tend to not be the most open people. And what I'm talking about specifically is from my own experience, is that when people used to come to me with a new idea, I was the person who could tell you all the things wrong with it. All the risks, the potential bottlenecks, all the costs, that it was going to be really expensive. Because as a technologist, and especially in operations, you're doing your job when you manage those risks and you try to make sure problems don't occur. But the problem is that this doesn't actually make people happy, right? They're not like, oh, you're so insightful, Kate. Like, you helped me realize all these mistakes before I made them. They actually just don't want to talk to you about their ideas, right? You've got to be someone who helps people make things happen. So try to be a yes and person instead of a no but. So think about it. What can you do to have better relationships at work? And then we're going to talk about Oprah. So what does Oprah have to do with your career? Well, this is the third part of trust, and it's really about your relationships and who your relationships are with. And to me, this is kind of the samurai part of trust, because all relationships are not created equal. So what do I mean? I like to think about trust as a graph. And it's not just any graph, it's a graph with weighted edges, where each of your relationships are these lines. And so you know from earlier that you should care about your relationship with your boss. But your relationships with everyone else are just as important. Why? Because if someone comes to me, I'm as your manager, and they say, Kate, this guy, he really did a bad job. Let's say Luke. Luke isn't very good. Then that's gonna, if someone says that to me and it's a person I really trust, it's gonna impact my opinion of Luke. Whereas if that person says, oh, Luke is amazing, which is probably more like what they would say, I would say that it would make me trust them more. So your relationship with everyone that you work with matters. But I want you to get even more deliberate and think specifically about your relationship architecture. So I want you to make 2 lists. You can make them in your head. The first list, I want it to be the most important people at your work. These are the people who get promoted or are constantly recognized or that you go to for help. They're really important ones. And maybe list them in order of importance in your head. Then I want you to make a second list. These are the people you go to coffee with, the people you like to eat lunch with, maybe talk to on a regular basis. And now I want to ask you, are these the same people? Because if they're not, then you have some work to do. Because important people now are likely to only be more important as time goes on. The past predicts the future. And if you don't have good relationships with them, in 5 to 10 years, right, you've got to look at a long results horizon. When they're asked to be a reference for you, don't you want them to say really good things? So if you're thinking now, well, Kate, that's all fine and good. Oops, I went backwards, sorry. Skip through this really fast. Clicker error. So if you're thinking, Kate, that's all fine and good, but some of these people, like I've got some negative, I burned those bridges, how do I fix it? Well, you can. Because if you think about every relationship that you have as a film strip, and every time you interact with someone, you're generating a frame in that film strip. So your relationship is like this movie. And the longer your film strip is, and the more frames you have, the more you trust them, the more you feel like you know them. And so if you have a negative frame, you can make it up by generating a lot more positive ones. This can be a lot of work, though, because they say for every negative interaction, you need 6 positive ones. So you better get started. Some ideas, take them to coffee. Ask them for help on a problem that you're working on. It's hard to dislike someone when you're helping them. So try to figure out how you can do things, because you want all of your friends at work to be the superstars. There's that famous Jim Rohn quote that you're the average of your 5 closest friends. And I think that holds true at work, too. So make sure that yours are the superstars. So just to recap, every piece of trust matters. Think about what is going to be your declaration of independence and how your great work will stand on its own. I want you to think about if you're someone worth trusting, just like you were to carry a police badge, and how your relationships can be as awesome as Oprah's, because she's got a pretty great network. So remember I told you you had to write something down, what you were going to do? I want you to think about it. I want you to come up with one thing, because the whole reason you're here is to learn and to be better, and so take action on it. Make yourself better. Choose to do something and try to improve it. And just to tie it back, right? As I learned in the beginning, your success isn't determined by the number of hours that you work or the lines of code that you write. Your success is determined by trust and how you can leverage that relationship framework within your organization. So think about each of these things and try to build trust with everyone you work with, because the more trust you build, the more you're going to get, and you'll be rich just like your trust with money. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful time at the conference.